Hello, lovely Knutepunkt people. I am Anni Tolvanen.
I'm Jamie MacDonald. Welcome to our talk about ensemble play for LARP Magic.
So, first of all, when we say LARP Magic, a show of hands, how many people in this room feel like that when somebody talks about LARP Magic, you have some idea what they are potentially talking about?
Yeah.
That's almost everyone.
So everybody kind of knows, in a sense, for themselves what LARP Magic is.
Yes. How many of you feel like that you have experienced LARP Magic on one occasion or another? That's almost the same amount of hands.
Good.
Looks like it. So, Jamie, would you like to tell me and the audience, what is LARP Magic to you?
We can describe it as it's a scene or a storyline or a chain of events that unravels or is unveiled in real time that is mutually satisfying and surprising, and it was not planned beforehand. About enough elements there? Yeah.
Yes. So we both come from a like a performer background. I am a musician. Jamie is a actor. And during our years of studying these things, we have in fact trained a lot to track what the fuck is going on in any given room or stage we are at. And just a while ago, a few years ago, I think both of us started realizing that, hey, wait a minute, a lot of these things in fact apply to LARPs. And since then we started tracking some of the LARPs we were at with a performer's eye, by which we mean
Performer's eye means that what you're looking at, what you've been trained to see happening in real time in improvisation based on the training that you've had. But it looks a little bit more like this, which is, the same thing that, as Ella was saying before in her Nordic LARP talk, that we are going into the scene trying to map what is going on in the room and what is going on in the LARP. A performer is in any improvisation or in any scene attempting to get in lots of input and decide what is the best thing to do right now. Yes.
And as performers, when we practice being better performers, now I clicked something, I shouldn't have clicked anything. Does it work now? Yes. This is just a random list of things that we might track when we are on stage or when we are doing co-creation with other, which of course happens also outside of the stage all the time. And if you look at this list, you can probably spot one of few or maybe hopefully more things that when you are LARPing, you are probably tracking a bunch of these things as well. Now I would actually want everybody in this room to look at this list and just for like 20 seconds and make a mental list of how many of these things do you pay attention to when you're LARPing. You walk into a room and you notice what? Is there something that's missing from this list? If yes, great, then you are tracking something that we didn't come up with in our shortlist.
So when you end up doing a performance, what you've got is you've got a lot of these things that are coming in, these signals that are coming in that you're tracking. And what you do with the signals that you track is you make a decision of what to contribute to the space, what to contribute to the action. So basically you're taking in everything that you are aware of, and you're also taking in things that you're not aware of at all, and then you do seemed like a good idea at the time. This is the best I can do with the information I have right now. And so we're also talking about the conscious decisions that we're making and the subconscious decisions. So some of these things I can pay attention to, others I don't. And I make the best decision based on the information I have.
And of course, this hopefully is self-evident that the more conscious decisions you make, then probably the more control you have over experience. Whereas if you just run into a space, don't really make any conscious effort to figure out what is going on, and then end up reacting anyways, then that comes from some sort of a gut feeling, but you are still making decisions like, Bjarke Pedersen likes to say when we talk about LARP design, the lack of design is still a design choice, and the same code goes for this, that you are making decisions even if they are happening sort of on a subconscious level, not necessarily unconscious like it says on the slide, because apparently I can't type.
So then what we end up with is a situation where you have many people in a room who are all trying to make the best decision at the same time. They're individual decisions. They're all taking in different signals, and some of the signals are kind of the same, but they're from different people. And everybody's trying to make a good decision at the same time.
So how do we learn how to do this? I have a flow chart.
Well, it's pedagogy. So when you're training to be a musician, or when you're training to be an actor, you get training of different skills. You get training of how to observe things, of how to listen to things, how to notice things. And then based on that, you start to make conscious decisions. And when you start, they are conscious decisions. If you want to play a note, when you're beginning, you have to concentrate on that note that you're going to play. Then, when you're in the situation where you're playing with everybody, you have this action that's going on with others, and then after that action, or even sometimes during the action, you get feedback. This worked in the way that you intended it to work. This did not work in the way that you intended it to work. Maybe you did this and you didn't even notice that you were doing it, but other people noticed you were doing it. You get feedback from a teacher, a guru, somebody who's trained to watch and give feedback.
And then when we got this far with our talks with Jamie around this topic, we realized that there's one very important difference between training performers, or different kinds of creative persons, and training LARPers, or us training ourselves as LARPers. And the difference is the lack of that kind of formal feedback.
Right.
Because us both have been, as performers, in a situation that we took part in some co-creative performance or process, or just maybe it wasn't just an exercise in a room without any audience whatsoever. And then there's somebody who's much more experienced than us that will come to you and go like, Jamie, did you notice when you did X, there was this Y going on there, and you completely ignored Y, and X was okay, but next time maybe pay attention to Y, and then you can better combine X with Y, and then more interesting things could happen. And we do not really have this feedback loop in LARPs, and we are not necessarily suggesting that we should introduce this feedback loop to the LARPs. But maybe us as individual LARPers can become more conscious of giving ourselves this feedback. Or maybe if we have really close LARPer friends, we could have these discussions with them. As in, hey, in that one scene, this thing happened, how did you feel about that? Is there somehow we could have co-created better in that moment? And this is not necessarily for everybody, and it doesn't need to be, but just kind of throwing this idea out there that we could create these feedback loops better. And one thing, even though Jamie is getting restless of time, I think now, but I wanted to add still to this notion that we now have this actually marvelous tradition of the LARPs having these feedback, so-called feedback threads on Facebook, like positive feedback threads, where people can leave their character name and then others come in and write nice stuff that, hey, it was lovely playing with you, this one scene was awesome. And this is, of course, a form of feedback. But the caveat of that form of feedback is that it tends to give a lot of positive credit and like even scene credit to players who just play really big and who take a lot of space and are really charismatic players. And then that kind of enforces the collective understanding that this kind of play style, like playing big, being charismatic, taking a lot of space, doing a lot of dramatic things, that is good LARPing. Because we literally see that one really charismatic, loud person getting all the kind of love and attention in those post-LARP feedback threads. And of course, most of us know that that is not the whole truth, but we might become more conscious about that as a community to remember that the really loud, charismatic players, they need the good feedback, but also the quiet players that contribute in small, smart ways also deserve the feedback.
What's the other word?
Sorry?
The word behind Jamie.
Action with others.
Yes, moving on. So, as performers, we are actively taught to think in any co-creative situations about what are my options for reacting to what is going on and how could I contribute to what is going on. And the emphasis here is what is going on. So the idea is not that I will just run in and do my thing, but it has to start from the place where I first try to do my best to figure out what is going on, and then basically what makes sense. What can I contribute after I have some understanding what is going on? And this brings us to an ensemble.
Yeah, which we can call a collective creative effort to react and contribute to action. And both of us are, we've been in ensembles before. The reason why an ensemble is very interesting is because an ensemble becomes more than the sum of its parts. And what I mean by that is that you've been in a situation where you're playing with others and ideas come up that you never would have had, but you get to be a part of them. It's not even that you get to watch somebody have an amazing idea, but you contributed, you collectively contributed to this amazing idea that never would have happened if you were both solo. And when also people are playing collectively, you can end up with a power that no single performer could achieve on their own.
And just for a practical example, what brought me to hold this topic is that I realized that as a musician, I love going to jam sessions within my genre of music. And in jam sessions, I end up often playing much better than I think I can play with my instrument. And I'm able to do much more interesting artistic choices. Because jam session is often really relaxed, there are drinks, people are enjoying themselves, there's no pressure to perform to anyone, and then you are surrounded often by other really skillful musicians, and we carry each other. And it's not that I think that I am the net winner, that I somehow suck more than everybody else and that I'm magically better alone, but I know that the stuff that I'm doing will help somebody else also be better. And that goes back to being more than sum of its parts, because all of us can bring in content that is new and challenging to others, and then we end up kind of challenging ourselves and each other, but also supporting each other. So now to take all of this to LARP context. So how we talked about this from a performer angle now first, but how could we become ensemble LARPers? And also, why exactly should we become ensemble LARPers?
So you could think that any combination of characters interacting with each other will position them into a temporary ensemble. We have ensembles in a LARP such as the group, the player groups that you have, the social groups that you have in a LARP. Those are potential ensembles, but also anybody who's in the same space at the same time.
And I guess this is kind of also not just you could think this, I think our main argument even is that if you walk into a room in the LARP and there's a random amount of people present, you will immediately have sort of a proto-ensemble, a group of people who, as a default, might end up co-creating together because you are in a LARP and you're in a space and you want to do something together, or not. Because this is, of course, only a potential, which goes back to the options that we have. We might walk into a room and be like, I have nothing to do with these people for whichever reason, and walk out. And then you kind of said no to that ensemble. But still, an ensemble could form anywhere and at any time in a LARP. Also, of course, we have a lot of pre-scripted ensembles, your friend group, pre-scripted friend group, or your secret society, or your military unit. All of these are pre-written ensembles that we often work to make more ensemble-like even before the LARP starts. And there I think that we already are working with literal ensemble skills. To understand that if we want this friend group to feel real and magical and fun, we have to work for it. But what we are now talking about is that we can, in fact, do the same kind of ensemble thinking during the runtime, applying certain skills. So how does one become a good LARPer?
LARP a lot, then you got it. No, we're going to introduce the idea that you have to actually consciously work to make the magic happen.
So here we have a very confused Jori who has agreed to be a punchline of our slideshow.
And when we are, as a performer, when we're going into an action, we end up in our heads with a whole bunch of self-reflective questions that are geared towards helping us find opportunities to be co-creative. So, for instance, do I understand what I do when I LARP? How do I decide what to do in a LARP? How do I make that decision? What kind of attention do I pay to other players in a LARP? Do I know when to step up and shine and when to give some space? Do I dare to challenge myself, or am I being a coward this week?
What kind of signals are there in the room? Like there was the whole list we posted earlier or put up earlier. What can I kind of grab in this room? Is there something missing from this room? Is there something that's desperately needed in the room? Is there an obvious gap that I could contribute to? Do I have something to contribute to? Maybe I see there's a gap, but I feel like I can't do anything about that. Fair enough. Would it make sense for me to contribute? Sometimes there's a gap, and the gap is just nice as it is. I don't necessarily need to be the person who immediately goes that, I want to fill this gap because I'm important.
Where is the focus in the room right now? What's the focus in the scene? Or what's the focus of the entire LARP right now? Am I contributing to the existing focus, or am I introducing a new one? Am I giving enough space for others to introduce new content? How can I invite others to support the focus that I would like to have in the room? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These happen, all the time. They're constant, and don't be too overwhelmed by these.
And of course, the idea of this question is that this is in no sense an exhaustive list of these questions. And the idea obviously is that we all have our own set of questions. Some of us might be already really good at finding out where the focus is, but then sucking at answering some other questions, and the other way around. And of course, some of us may need to come up with our own set of questions that make sense. But the thought process we are trying to introduce here is that the same process that goes for developing this performer's or creator's eye obviously goes for developing a good LARPer's eye.
That's a little bit different because you can't really train or practice LARPing exactly, but you can practice observation. And you can make conscious decisions. And of course, you don't want to feel like you're in a LARP just consciously playing individual notes all the time, like really trying to make these hard decisions all the time. But the more you practice them, of course, they become lightly conscious. But you are still, putting yourself out there consciously. Then you have the action with others. And then, as we said, the feedback is something that we don't get that much. But in any case, this is something that can be a personal practice of having these conscious decisions and trying to get feedback of, did what I want to happen happen?
And for feedback, being aware of the fact that just how everybody else is reacting to what you are doing, that is, of course, one of your most important facets of feedback in a LARP, as in that I have been historically a player that ended up having shitty time at LARPs without really understanding why. And then through, mostly I would like to say, through the performance training, I started to realize that there are things that I'm simply not tracking. There are options that I'm not seeing. There are decisions that I'm not making because I'm just completely unaware that those options exist for me. So then when I started to become more aware of those options, then I started making different kinds of decisions, and then the practical feedback in the moment obviously also changed. But I just had to develop my skills in order to be aware of those options and aware of the feedback.
Anni, this sounds like a lot of work. Why can I not just play my character and have a good time?
We should absolutely just play our characters and have a good time. But the payoff, the major reason why we should develop these skills is that when we collectively and consciously put effort into playing as an ensemble, that simply creates more LARP magic for everyone. Because what we realized in our artistic practice is that the magic happens when the magical moments are often the result of an ensemble working together and putting the effort into building something that is more than the sum of its parts. And these are techniques that we can use to harness the LARP magic. We can consciously steer towards LARP magic through applying this skill set. And one of my major arguments for saying that this is in fact the case is that when I started thinking about my most magical LARP moments, where LARP magic felt real for me, all of them, or like the absolute majority of them, circle back to an ensemble forming, an ensemble working nicely together. Don't we just love technology? Jamie, can you say something really smart, and I will maybe hook up this laptop to a power supply.
I would like to say something smart but also relevant, so. I'm just looking for where we are. So when we come back, we can, are we going to be back?
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll
When
find out. Just work with me as an ensemble, Jamie.
All right.
How
So-
hard can it be?
So you left off talking about how making the bold claim that more collective work will involve more LARP magic. And we remember we did, in the beginning, we were talking about all these signals that we have that we track. The more signals that we are tracking, it means we have more options, more freedom to act in what we're doing. And the more conscious decisions we're able to make, the more control we have over the experience, and then the more collective effort we get from everyone, the bigger profit for everyone in the end. So those are and then on top of that, when we have more openness towards this co-creativity, we end up with more inclusivity and more equity in LARPers. You can't really have an ensemble when you have somebody in the room who's being left out. That is by definition not an ensemble. And learning how to think about prioritizing ensemble in the room means you don't leave out anyone who's there. So it's a way of looking at the space and looking at the scene that is happening that doesn't narrow your focus onto the thing that you want to play right now, but it opens up your focus to who is here right now and what can happen here collectively. It's in fact a very easy way to be inclusive.
Yes.
Have you got a dongle?
What?
Have you got a dongle?
Yeah, I do.
Was that, is that HDMI?
Yeah, no, this works just fine.
Okay.
Let us see if I can get the slides back up.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, please do.
You said, I mean, or I just realized something as you were talking, and I'm a little bit tired, so this might be confused, but I feel like, of course we should do this, but actually doing it while you are having the problem can be like hard. So I was trying to think about practical moments, and then you said something just now that unlocked something for me, which is being open. And I feel like at the beginning of LARPs, and also often at the beginning of like entering a space, I physically feel like clenched. I am not open, like in my attention. I'm worried about what am I gonna find, or is this gonna be good, or like I'm looking for play, that fucking thing, or like who am I gonna play? So there's like maybe a practical shortcut could be that whenever I'm entering a new room, even at that moment, just like check in, perhaps before I go into the room, am I open to what's happening there, or am I entering terrified? Because I feel like when I enter terrified, I'm not open. These words are not like without your training, I don't know what to call these things, but I know how it feels in the body, you know?
No, but with your LARP context, with your LARP context, you explain it so everybody in the room gets it anyway. So.
No, it's
but
not.
like if I were able to train myself to enter a room so that I go in with the mindset that I'm kind of already open for checking out what's happening instead of going in fear first.
Right.
I might be able to contribute more. But then the trick is the people in the room kind of also have to be open for the fact that somebody else might enter. And in reality, we know that that's much harder because you might already be in the scene.
Right.
I don't know. So do you have something to say about like how to remain open while you've already made a group with a group, and now somebody else enters the room?
We actually, well, when we get to the end of the talk, we have some practicalities of what are the pitfalls and then how to kind of work around them. Slide 33.
Yes.
Slide 33. We went through this, just not visually. Right. Okay. So I can't be responsible for everybody's LARP experience. I would really like to make a little bit of plans with a handful of people who I know and trust, and then I want to concentrate on those connections.
Obviously, you cannot be a best ensemble made to 100 players simultaneously. That's overwhelming. You have to prioritize. However, what we have seen happening in a bunch of LARPs is that there are players that and in some LARP designs this makes sort of sense. And the LARP design even may steer players towards making this decision, but people walk in with very filled dance cards. If somebody doesn't know what the dance card is, this was a thing that happened in the 19th century Europe, where people would go, like high-class people would go into a ball, and both women and men would have these kind of cards, and then men would go to women and ask that, would you like to dance the quadrille with me? And then they would write the name to the card, and then of course the man would also then write to his card that, okay, I am booked for this person for this dance and whatnot. And then, of course, then the ball just was like, basically what happens in the ball was predetermined by the dance card. And I have tried to coin this concept of dance card LARPing, as in people going into the LARP having very clear plans of I'm going to play this content with these people and this content with these people. And you might end up having a really cool experience, a very customized experience. You might end up even pulling other people in to get a kind of a crumbles of your dance card table. However, it robs you of the magic of serendipity. How do you pronounce that?
You had it. Serendipity.
Serendipity, yes. And also, more, if we talk about from a more community angle, it robs you out of the collective pool of LARPers that are available for play. That if I have a really full dance card, some players might come to me and want to interact with me, but I'm incredibly aware that I have to be in the fight club in the dungeon in 5 minutes, so cool thing, like, let's talk later, cheers, and then I'm out. And then I probably ended up missing out on something interesting and something that I was not planning for. And yes, to go back to the question, you should absolutely make plans, but try to be conscious about, while making those plans, that you have plenty of room in your dance card for just being open to whatever happens during the LARP.
Okay, I am sold. I am going to try this out. How?
A gold star ensemble player, and let's just put it out there, neither of us is a gold star ensemble player. We would love to be gold star ensemble players one day. We are not yet, but here are some of the things you can do, which is listen to your co-creators, see what they are up to, see if you can support it somehow.
Anticipate opportunities.
Pick up cues and impulses. somebody over there did something interesting. Maybe like instead of trying to do something interesting myself, I could just pick up that signal, join it, and then there are suddenly two people doing something interesting, which will probably build into something bigger.
Paying attention to content.
Other than your own! For God's sake, people, your character is important, but so are everybody else's character. Running into spaces and being like, my character is here! I come here with all of my really interesting stories, and would you like to hear me talk about my character to you, Jamie, in-game? Because this is in-game, and I'm excused for talking about my character endlessly. Other people have interesting content too. Make space for it.
Building for delayed gratification. This comes up with anticipate opportunities. Opportunities are going to come. There will be one. There will be one. And also, there will be another one later. And you can postpone things. You can sit on your hands and allow things to build over time.
Which means that you should decide when to act, consciously, hopefully, when to step back, and when to take a lot of space. There will be the opportune moment to go and be like, my character is here, but it's not 100% of the time. You just have to kind of make a guess when would be the best time.
There is a time to solo. There absolutely is a time to solo, and then there's a time for accompaniment. I went to a LARP and I tried and it sucked, so help.
This doesn't always work out. Because we are really good at shooting ourselves in the foot. In Knutepunkt, maybe I walk in the hallway, there's a room party, I see the, oh, room party. I don't run into the room and be like, my character is here. I will have pre-existing social codes on, maybe I'll kind of go in and see who's there and see how I relate to the room and what is going on. We already have a ton of these skills, how to do good ensemble LARPing, but somehow when we're in a LARP and we're playing a character, we forget about some of these social skills and completely normal human interaction facets. And that's sort of also the good news, because that only means that we have to stop shooting ourselves in the foot, which is probably a good idea for most of us.
So the first pitfall, desire for perfectionism. Perfect is the enemy of good. This means that you go into a scene and you want it to be great all the time. Everything you do everything you say, your character says, has to be cool. Everything your character does has to be cool. And if it's not great and cool, you suck.
Or you don't do it at all, which I think is the kind of the bottom layer of this bottomless pit. As in, you don't do the thing because you're too afraid that it won't be perfect. Yeah. And that's really sad.
Yeah. So the way to get over that is to allow yourself to start small, allow yourself to fail, get comfortable with failing. Say like, I want to fail 10 times in this LARP. And
Play
fail.
to lose,
Yeah.
Anyone? Yes, and also with ensemble, the whole point of the ensemble is that they are there to catch you. Your failure, if you kind of try something out and it will be really embarrassing and awkward, if you are playing with a good and supportive ensemble, they will turn that into something really interesting, which is great. Then you did not actually fail.
The hunger to play big. Thank you, Shell, for being the fall guy for this slide. This is a player who will be focused on their story.
My character is here!
Yes, yeah. And as Anni has said before, the difficulty, the challenge that comes in with this one is that you narrow your focus and you're not able to see what's going on in the whole room. You're not allowed to, doesn't let you take in more input that is coming from other people. And you just kind of go through the LARP playing the hero of your own little LARP while everybody else around you is kind of an NPC. And that doesn't work so well. So, the
And-
way to get. Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, but of course we do talk about that your character should be the kind of the hero of their own story and the most important person of their own story, but there's a difference between being the central figure in your own story and kind of just taking shit tons of space and expecting everybody else give that space to you without you giving back to them. So being more conscious of what we briefly, Jamie said about solo and accompaniment, when I am just kind of soloing away, and when I am kind of consciously letting somebody else to shine and solo, and then I'm putting my LARPer skill efforts to supporting them. And that is not actually even playing down, or it's not inferior play. It can be incredibly rewarding play to see an interesting thing that somebody else is building and then contribute to that, because that's precisely the thing, what I said earlier, of us ending up playing better than we thought that we even could play.
And it's hard to know if this is you.
Yes.
Because often the people
Yes.
who are doing this aren't taking in a lot of external cues. So it's hard to know, but you can suspect it's you. And if you suspect it's you, you can practice sitting on your hands for a second.
Or
Actively make space. Practice. Make a conscious decision, lightly conscious decision, to actively let some of your opportunities go by to see what other people do.
yes, you do not need to seize every opportunity to play your character. It's counterintuitive, but that is true. I have been this player multiple times. Have you been this player?
Never.
How many people in this room have been this player?
Yeah.
Most of us, yes. Okay, the exact opposite, the fear of standing out. I, for one, have been the LARPer and seen other people in the LARPer who in the after party is just miserable because they did not get the experience that they wanted. And sometimes, yes, the LARP failed them, the design failed them, their core players failed them. It was not possible for them to get the experience that they wanted. But sometimes they also, and this is really hard thing to admit, especially to yourselves, sometimes we just do not step up to face the challenge. Sometimes we do not dare to take space, which is understandable. It's socially challenging, especially for Nordicans, to be like, no, I demand attention to my focus and to my thing. But unfortunately, being part of an ensemble also means daring to take space and daring to demand attention to things that are important
Yeah,
to you.
you have to solo sometimes. Everyone has to solo in an ensemble.
And take risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
we had a lovely, there's a Carrie Fisher quote about,
yes.
if you're afraid, stay afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah. So this goes for LARPs. If you really would want to do something and you're really afraid, stay afraid. Do it. Just do it. Obsession with LARP magic.
Yeah, this is super interesting because we love LARP magic, so we're chasing LARP magic. We want the scene to be magic immediately, and we join into the scene that looks somewhat magical so we can get right into that magical wave without realizing that magic has to be built from the beginning. It has to be built from the ground up. You can't just kind of like jump into the magic and chase these big scenes all over the LARP. So the way to kind of get around this tendency, if you notice that you're constantly chasing for the magic and it's never there, think about instead of like making it happen, allow it to happen. Take the small opportunities, right? So when somebody offers you something that seems really insignificant, take it and allow it to go where it's going to go. You have to play the scene that you're in, not the scene you want to be in.
I, for one, have multiple times been in a scene that feels like that, okay, this is totally not working out, and then this massive FOMO starts building up, as in, oh, there's probably this kind of orgy going in the dungeon, and why am I not in that orgy? Why am I stuck in this very dull scene with this very dull people? And completely forgetting that it's totally within my power to change the scene I am in and come up with something, some content that would make sense for me, because the players who are in that scene sort of stuck with me are probably also feeling like that it would be nice if something interesting would happen. And then we can collaboratively make something interesting happen instead of everybody just kind of running around in circles and trying to find that magical scene, when we could just stop and start building the magic with the people whom we are with in that current scene.
This is when you have a nice, quiet room and someone comes in with a boffer sword.
And a blindfold.
Yeah. Because sometimes...
Proverbial blindfold.
Sometimes we're we're avoiding boredom, that beautiful boredom. We're avoiding it, and we're afraid of emptiness and nothingness, because if nothing is happening, that means it sucks. So we make something happen to fill the quietness without ever really noticing what is happening at any given time. I will promise you, there is never nothing happening.
Yeah.
Never nothing happening. There's always something. And if you just allow yourself to be in the nothing for a second, something will emerge.
Yes, and most of all, you start tracking options. That's the thing. It's not necessarily that something will automatically happen, but you will start tracking what your options are, and then you can make better conscious decisions on what do I want to do with this situation.
This is a great one. Sometimes your play styles clash. Sometimes you want to pull the LARP in different directions. You just have disagreements over taste, and it just happens. And the way you get through this one is simply pick your battles. Have some give and take. Sometimes you just, okay, I'm going to try out this other person's play style. I'm going to go with it for a hot minute. Maybe it turns out to be really cool. And sometimes I decide, no, not today. I'll leave the scene.
Yes. And that goes back to the whole, you can't cater to 100% at the same time, but I think the most important thing we'd like people to get better at is that if somebody comes and offers you play that is incredibly not interesting to you, try to give them something. Try to give them something within the spirit of co-creation. Never say totally no, unless you have a really good, strong, off-game reasons. Maybe that person is an abusive asshole and you really don't want to play with them. Then, of course, don't cater to them. But if it's just some random person that you really don't feel for that much, try to give them something. Which brings us to...
social bias. This is a really big one. We don't have a lot of time for this one, but this is very large. You go into a room, and there's some people you want to play with, and some people you don't want to play with. But an ensemble is everybody in the room.
Yes, and I mean, this is a difficult topic. We should all be very aware of this. We should be aware of our bias towards, again, charismatic, beautiful people that is human, or sometimes the other way around, that we feel that some people are too charismatic and beautiful, intelligent, they're completely out of our league, and then, again, we don't go to play with them, which sucks for you, but it also sucks for them. Let's try to overcome ourselves. There's no easy solution except that we should try to not be dick to others and be brave to ask for the play we want from everyone.
And finally, sometimes it's just not the day. Sometimes everybody's trying their best, and in a musical jam session, sometimes people show up, they're ready, they're good, they're listening. It just doesn't happen. So don't beat yourself up about it. Try again.
And I mean, usually something happens. It's just that the magic doesn't appear every time.
Yeah.
You can kind of just work really well together, but then it just stays in the kind of the lukewarm level throughout. And that is okay. That's co-creation. It was not necessarily a worse LARP for it. And a good ensemble player is graceful about the fact that, okay, this is not working out, but let's make best out of it anyways.
And we are wrapping up with another round.
So, what is ensemble play? And why it is important? We think ensemble play grants us moments of magic we cannot predict or design.
It makes us challenge our insecurities and our inhibitions.
And it contributes to a better off-game community by creating play where players feel supported and able to take risks. Now, We have written, in fact, a bunch of more academically inclined jargon about this topic, which you can read from the What Do We Do When We Play, Knutepunkt Solmukohta 2020 Player Skills book. The article is also online at nordiclarp.org, and so will this speech be later on. Thank you to Karin Edman and Johannes Axner for recording it for us. Any final words, Jamie?
Well, we are going to continue with a workshop after this where we're going to try and practice some of the kind of listening and observing that fosters ensemble work. That'll be really simple, but hopefully very interesting.
Yes, and the workshop will take place in the third room in this
Yes.
And otherwise, we're done with the talk part. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.